Greetings everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm your host Captain Ryan. Today's YouTube video comes from subscriber Frizzonate, who is in the Tier 6 Japanese battleship, the Fuso, here in World of Warships. The battle is on the straight map and it's standard battle mode. The straight map has two different spawn locations for your team, one to the north and one to the south, making your team situation effectively split. The problem is the teams don't always split equally, and if you've got carriers in the game, like this game has, you'll end up with one carrier on one end of the map and one carrier on the other end of the map. As the battle gets underway here, Frizz has decided that he is going to push the enemy base, since that's the side that he's spawned on. He's not alone, he's got a lot of ships with him pushing this direction. He gets shots out here early on at an enemy cruiser who was broadside on, but the cruiser did realize his mistake and turned away, avoiding pretty much all of those incoming shots and living to fight another day. And the Fuso here in World of Warships has gone through many iterations since Alpha, and I think one of the biggest things that has changed since I played the Fuso is that there's no longer the stock Fuso. The stock Fuso was absolutely atrocious. It had something like a 13-kilometer gun range and an 18-kilometer detection range. It was also very slow and nearly unplayable. Realizing that nobody could suffer through such a terrible stock build on the Fuso, Wargaming did finally decide to remove the stock hulls and replace them with something a little more advanced. Better range, better anti-aircraft for sure. The advantage to the Fuso over the other Tier 6 battleships in the game is that the Fuso has the longest range of any of the battleships. She's also got a pretty decent dispersion when it comes to that range. If you look here, those shots, very nice and clustered. Her gun layout is 12 14-inch guns spread over 6 turrets. And that's important because if you get a turret knocked out, you're only losing 1/6 of your firepower, as opposed to the New Mexico, where if you get a turret knocked out, you're losing 1/4 of your firepower. The disadvantage to the Fuso is that she's a squishier target than the New Mexico or the Bayern, in the respect that she doesn't have turtleback armor, and she doesn't have an all-or-nothing protection scheme that provides the same kind of protection that the New Mexico gets. So often you can find that it's actually quite easy to citadel a Fuso, especially if it's broadside on, due to this lack of armor. And of course, if you look at the size of the Fuso is absolutely massive. If you stuck a Scharnhorst next to it, the Scharnhorst is actually smaller than the Fuso, and so the Citadel is actually quite large. Now, the enemy team has taken an early advantage here by destroying one of Frizz's team's destroyers, but that's alright. They had 3 of them, so they still have a destroyer advantage over the enemy team, and they have managed to take out one other ship, and that's going to give them a points advantage. Remember, this is standard battle mode, so every ship you take out is going to give the enemy team an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on what you take out. And of course, until somebody actually steps on your cap, you're going to continue to gain points. But speaking of stepping on the caps, it looks like Frizz's got a friendly destroyer up there who has pushed up far enough to step on the enemy cap, and that's going to cause them some problems. Well, he's not actually capping because they are there and challenging it. It is going to prevent them from gaining points, while his base capture is going to continue to push up. A bit of a critique for you here in this particular replay of some things that you could definitely work on some things that look like you're doing wrong, or at the very least not doing as correctly as you could be. First and foremost, please stop tracking your shots with every single shot you take. It's not important. The shot tracking is meant to be used specifically if you're shooting at things that are like behind islands. They're still detected, you just can't see where your shots fall from a distance. And the reason I say that you don't need to do shot tracking is primarily because you can see where they fall anyway, and because zooming in on your shells takes you away from your ship for several seconds. And that could be the difference between eating one torpedo and eating a whole broadside. Now you do manage to hit a citadel there on that Leander, but I know you weren't shooting at the Leander, I know you were shooting at that broadside New Mexico. And that's the other thing that I wanted to point out to you in this particular replay, is that you need to learn better target prioritization. I see a lot of battleships will do this in games. They'll get fixated on slugging it out and brawling with other battleships. And while you can get some pretty high damage numbers doing that, you don't gain XP based off of the amount of damage you do, but based off of the percentage of damage that you do to an enemy warship. So for instance, doing 20,000 damage to a cruiser, like you did there with that Leander, is worth the same amount of XP as doing, say, 100,000 damage to a battleship. And when dealing with cruisers, it's important to get rid of them quickly because they can cause you some problems through high explosive end torpedoes. Now you did manage to take out that aircraft carrier, which is always good, taking out Sky Cancer from the game. And that was a good example of when to use your shot tracking, because that carrier was disappearing behind an island. You couldn't necessarily see where your shots were falling. And in that particular situation, not being fully confident in your shots, you can definitely go ahead and use that shot tracking. Taking a shot here at the broadside Congo in the distance, and then there is that Leander again. Now this is another factor that I see a lot of battleship players will do. It's a mistake that too many make. All of your guns were pointed the other direction, and they were all pointed pretty far forward the other direction. And you're turning the opposite direction that your guns were effectively pointed. This is going to take half your guns out of the game while they get turned around. And you had a prime target in the form of that Leander. Instead, you could have turned the opposite direction to keep all your guns on bear and cause some serious damage before that Leander got behind the cover of the island. But going back to target prioritization, if you're in a battleship and you find yourself facing off against cruisers, destroyers, other battleships, and even carriers, your target prioritization should always be the biggest threats to you. In the order that I use is effectively, does it have torpedoes? Am I inside of its torpedo range? If the answer is yes, that is the ship that I'm going to shoot at first. So that means I will prioritize destroyers and cruisers over battleships, especially if the destroyers and cruisers are within so many kilometers and can launch torpedoes at me. Finally, prioritizing battleships. Battleships are hard targets. They're not soft and squishy. They're definitely more difficult to penetrate. If they're angled, even more so. So shooting at the soft targets first will give your team an advantage. It will give your team an advantage as far as being up on points, but it will also give your team an advantage as far as not having to worry about torpedoes and fire-starting ships. Frizz does manage here to take out that New Mexico by causing some serious problems. The New Mexico broadside on there. Surprisingly enough, the New Mexico did manage to Citadel Frizz from a particularly good angle, which I'm actually a little bit surprised by. Never get that kind of RNGs. Most of my shots probably would have bounced. Enemy torpedoes coming in from the Nuremberg that is hiding behind, or the Königsberg that's hiding behind that island there. And that Königsberg is pushing up slightly. But not to worry, he has launched those torpedoes from this side of his ship, so as he pushes around the island, he's got nothing to fire back at our hero here. But again, going into the prioritization of targets, always shoot your biggest threats first, then focus on the harder targets at range. The other thing that I'll critique you on here is that I noticed you've got a spotter aircraft, the catapult spotter, that increases your range, and I'm surprised you haven't used it yet. Especially with all of the shot tracking that you do, the spotter aircraft, when used, provides you a more top-down view as well as increasing your range. This means that you can see over islands when shooting at things, and again, means that you don't have to zoom away from your ship to track your shots. In this particular situation, with enemy battleships at your base, in the process of capping, I would have launched that fighter because it would have provided you a better top-down view to use in your shot tracking, as well as lining up your shots. Now, you do manage to hit one of the ships and reset. You don't do a lot of damage there, which is a little surprising, considering that ship broadside on and out in the open. But oh well, can't get them all the time. You take blind shot here, which is a little bit surprising. I would have waited for somebody to spot that battleship. Your shots are always more accurate when you're shooting at something. But it looks like they're on target anyway, and yes, in fact, they do manage to citadel that ship. And your team manages to secure the win by capping out. In spite of the critiques, though, a very good result and a fairly good battle, well played there, kept that armor angling, and of course did quite a bit of damage, earning yourself a high caliber award for 156,000 damage done in a tier 6 maximum battle. Only 2 kills though, but a good number of citadels, of course a basic cap assist, and a good number of base resets. What's really surprising here is the total base XP. Top of the team for base XP earned at 2,000 base XP. Nobody else in the entire game, even on your team, managed to earn more than 900 base XP. That's right, nobody got 1,000 base XP in that game, so you earned double the next nearest player in the game. Anyway, that's it for today's video, folks. If you liked the video, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below. If you'd like to get semi-regular channel news and updates, you can do so by liking and following me on Facebook. If you'd like to help support me in the channel, as well as gain access to some of my World of Warships replays early, you can do so by becoming my supporter on Patreon. If you've got a replay like this one that you'd like to see featured on my channel, you can send it to my email. And if you'd like to watch me play World of Warships, among other games, live, you can do so by following me on Twitch. You can find the links for all of those in the video description down below. And as always, I'll see you next time. This is Captain Rye, signing off.